Sydney.
What's going on? How you doing?
How you doing, sir?
Good. Very
Very
good.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right. Let me, always come to these with cue cards.
Yeah, you
Cue
gotta have
cards
the cue
are
cards. You
good.
gotta have the questions. So.
All right. So our guest is Sydney Mayhew, Ward 4 Councilor, and since 2014.
Yeah, a few years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And
been a while.
since last year, the council chair.
Yes,
Yes.
that was a big step for you there.
It certainly was. Certainly based on, and it's probably one of the most honorable things that I have been nominated to do, specifically because the people on the council, the present and current council of this year, which I feel is the most productive council that we've had in all of my 5 years.
Yeah.
We have a great bunch of individual people that are analytical. They very much look for information to base their decisions on. They're from all walks of life.
Yeah, that's one big thing.
We have school involvement. We have business people, and we just have a wide variety of people that really have great input. Being nominated by 5 Democrats and 1 Republican to be the chair. A Republican chair is unheard of in the city of Waterville. Matter of fact, I don't think in the history of Waterville there has been one.
Making history.
I know it, huh?
It's that's why it's such an honorable thing,
Right, definitely.
to be a part of that. And my entire focus and job has been to be a more interactive, communicative, and accessible chair to the rest of the council, and most importantly, a nonpartisan chair that listens and has dialogue with councilors. And the greatest part about being that is that I'm able to lead by example. I'm able to have dialogue and discussion like I've never had before with other councils. We do a lot of communication between each other. We have a lot of different dialogue with each other, and we are able to make better informed decisions, and there's a trust factor there. You can't be looking at individual councilors based on party when you're in a position where you're nominated to lead. You have to lead by example. You have to be the product of dialogue, and you have to include and be cooperative with each other to the point where you can trust each other and you can come to each other and talk about anything, whether it be an agenda item or a personal item. It's certainly something.
I think that's probably been one of the biggest things that I've seen this council work towards.
Yes, and I think a lot of people have seen that, through the videos that have been made of the council and other people that have come into the council. We still have elements that want to bring back from the old councils and create divisiveness and division. Everybody here, no pun intended, but we see that to this day.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of stuff that is what we want to try to avoid.
Counterproductive.
And it is counterproductive because at the end of the day, the city's business has to be done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So as you know, you're not up for re-election this year, like most of the guests that we've had on here.
Right.
So what do you plan on doing for your ramp, because you're up for re-election next year, though, right?
Yes.
So what do you plan on doing for your ramp up for re-election for next year?
Basically to bring the message of what I just said, of the council being a productive council, being one of dialogue and discussion and cooperation. I think the greatest thing that's missing out of the from previous councils that have been in place in the 5 years that I've been on the council is that personal interaction between each other without any divisiveness or other dark cloud of partisanship that has come into play. I've said it 100 times within the council chambers, and I'll say it again. I don't believe on a local level that we should have parties of Democrat or Republican.
Right.
And I've been an advocate for that for a long time, because on a local level, ideally and essentially in Waterville, in order to get the city's business done, we are all neighbors of each other. Whenever I knock on a constituent's door, and once in a while I have constituents that want to remind them of what party that I'm in. And the first thing I say, well, the party doesn't mean anything to me, and I want to explain why, is because, You know, I want to be a good neighbor. That's ultimately what I'm trying to be. You go back to the old, go back to the old adage of aldermen. That's what they were known back then. They walked the streets, they knocked on people's doors, they listened to their constituents, and that's what we have to get back to as council people. And that's the reason why, you know, I made a video and put it on the website, you know, because when you take your oath of office, you've got to take it seriously. You can't just go out and do the beat of your ward just because it's election time.
Right.
Right.
I'm total opposite of that. And
And you have been known for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Newsletters, walking door to door, talking to all your constituents.
I manufacture my own newsletters. I manufacture all of the things. I pay someone to develop a website. I pay, you know, good money. All the money that I obviously earn as a counselor, I don't see because it goes back into campaigning. It goes back into information that I provide for my constituents. So it's done because that's what I do. I want to serve my community, and I have a passion.
Right, that's
for my
what it
community.
is. It's the
Yeah.
passion that drives most
So-
of us. I know that's what drives me.
Yeah, I get out at least 2 or 3 times a year. I develop my own newsletters. It's expensive, and I will admit it is expensive to do that because the costs rise far more above of what you certainly make as a city official. So, you know, but I do that because I want to give back to the city. I want to give back to especially to be the voice of my neighborhood, and that's why I feel like walking your ward, knocking on doors. You really can't sit at the table as a true council person and be the voice for your constituency if you're not going out there and making contact and finding out what the vibe is on every
Right.
street of what your constituents want you to represent them as.
Right.
So that's, you know, I'm a firm, strong believer in that.
Awesome. So, as we discussed earlier, your chair, how do you think you take that responsibility in regards to how you vote on different topics?
Anything that I vote on is something that I put a great amount of analytical view on. I never take something from superficial. I dive into it and I investigate it. As chair, it has changed a little bit because now I go a lot about consensus. I go with a lot about the more dialogue amongst the councils. I go a lot more on possible compromise with each council. If we have a council or two that are wavering and don't know which way to go, which I try to be the intermediary on that, and try to find out why a certain council is feeling that way, or even myself. I'll have discussion and dialogue with other council members to get my point of view across and then back to me. The greatest thing about this current council is that the civility of what you see with us as council members has been off the charts.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly we do not pay any attention to a vote that goes one way or the other or disagree. We still, at the end of the meeting, get up and shake hands and treat each other with due respect. And we usually already have a discussion of which way each one's going to vote, and we respect each other on what we say because of that vote, and we move on. You never have seen that with past councils in a great degree because usually votes are based on creating a divisiveness nature. And
Last
it usually,
council was
and it usually
very,
involves
very-
it usually involves a more liberal approach camp and a conservative camp.
Right.
Yep.
And when they come to play with each other, they sort of line up and make allies with one another to pit their message across
Right.
to each other on both sides. I'm kind of, when I act as chair, I kind of want to bridge the gap.
Right.
Sure.
We all want the same thing. We just
Appreciate
want
that.
different drives to get there.
Exactly, and create compromise, create dialogue, because at the end of the day, you know, it's the same here on the local level, it is all the way up to the national level. There's not anywhere near enough of that.
No.
And that is exactly why there is such a break and such a stain
Right.
upon, you know, the government of everywhere from a national stage on down, because there isn't enough of that.
You know.
So, how do you propose lowering taxes and generating revenue for the city?
Number one priority for the city of Waterville, and for this council, obviously being the governing board of that I want to make something very clear, and I say it over and over again, like I said prior to. The residents of Waterville are the CEOs of us. No individual councilor can walk around with a chip on his shoulder thinking otherwise. It is absolutely a necessity for us to realize that, because we can be terminated at any time. If we're not going out and do due diligence and doing what we're supposed to be doing, like I said before, knowing the vibe of your wards, knowing the vibe of your
Right.
streets,
Yep.
getting the input of what's important. The number one priority is revenue, economic vitality, sustainability has always been the top of my agenda. How we do that is be as analytical and ideally financially responsible as we possibly can, looking at everything. I really believe the partnership of Colby College is a positive. I have been hearing and seeing and talking to business people on an unprecedented level.
I was gonna say, you're a big voice for the business community for Waterville.
Yes, and I'm
so-
very pro-business. You'll see that in my voting record. Pro-business because ultimately, business entrepreneurs are what's going to drive the state into the sustainability, and eventually taxes will come down. We recently had a tax revaluation, as you know, that turned sour just a few years ago when there was a shift from commercial to residential, and it creates a continuing and ongoing burden upon many residents in Waterville, because taxes went up in individual wards much higher than some wards didn't see a rise in taxes at all.
Right.
Some stabilized, but some were increased beyond belief. And I've heard my ward in particular was affected by that. And I know several other wards that were affected, really dangerously because of that, because I have constituents that are literally believing and thinking and have already gone to real estate brokers to put their places up for sale. When I started in the council, there were for sale signs on every street of my ward, as there are in many wards across the city. But since this Colby partnership has happened, and since downtown has revitalized and continues to revitalize, as we see with the federal grant that's coming in, and the two-way traffic coming in, and the incredible amount of outpouring of money that is coming into the downtown to revive it. And that the peripherals of the city are even seeing businesses that once were closed and the shutters were drawn. They're starting to reopen. There's more development on the peripherals of Waterville. There's more projects. There's more of and completely...
The youthfulness is back.
Yeah, I mean, the millennials are coming in and they're entrusting, they're having new trust in the city. Well, we are the talk in the state capitol, in the city of Augusta. I know of several state representatives and senators that when they come out of chambers and they're in recess, and there's a lot of lobbyists and there's a lot of business people that go there and partake in, obviously, the sessions in the legislature. We are the talk of the state, Waterville is, because everybody wants to start a business in Waterville because of what's going on here.
Right.
As you can see, we have great, the nails.
Yeah, they just purchased another building.
Purchased another building.
Yep.
They're reinvesting into their hometown city. We're seeing the Dupree's alumni of
Yep.
Kobe. They're investing back into the city. We see Bill Mitchell has expanded his entrepreneurship and he's investing back into the city. And countless names that I can come up with as business people are reinvesting many, many millions of dollars in conjunction with the trusting of Colby College of spending so much money to create business vitality that is just off the charts for Waterville. I see the next revaluation that is going to happen, or we should call for one soon, is once the city has gone through the two-way traffic and the business are starting to stabilize, that we do a revaluation so we can take the tax burden off the residential and put it back onto the commercial where it ultimately belongs. There are many fixed income people and senior citizens in my ward that I advocate every day.
Yes.
I am a financial conservative mindset. I very much fight for, I know that Mayor Nick Isgro will say the same thing, and I'll say it again, fight for the forgotten men and women on every street and every corner within the ward. I see and meet and shake hands and talk in their kitchens and living rooms with many of them. They are certainly still the majority in Waterville.
Right.
And they are living on a fixed income that is just, even nickels and dimes mean a lot to them when bills go up.
Yep.
We're talking the difference, I have talked to so many of them that say, what is the difference between me getting a prescription or medication or me having a meal on the table?
Yep.
That's
And
horrible.
this is what reality is on
That's-
many street
yeah.
corners in Waterville, and we cannot turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to that. So I totally believe that the revenue intake from what is happening with the revitalization and the businesses that are opening and the infrastructure that's being built, from the hotel to obviously the dorm that has been built downtown, to the Haynes building being recreated.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're gonna start making
And
a lot more,
CGI moving in there. We all know about Portland Pie coming.
work residential housing.
Yeah, exactly. And that is another topic with housing, is another great economic element to Waterville, because a lot of the companies that have moved into Waterville don't have enough people that are in housing that can come into town within the immediate area, and they can sustain them and they can be here for longevity to keep the companies going. There are programs now through Colby College where there's internships being created, where people are being trained. Actually, people are being trained for CGI through
Yep.
Colby College because of that partnership that they brought CGI into. These are the kinds of programs that we need to keep businesses going and to help them expand and sustain themselves and create jobs and create, an element that will eventually drive down the tax mill rate because of what's being invested in Waterville. That is where it's all about. It's all about
That
creating,
long-term goal.
yes, creating, sustaining, and expanding business will help lower our tax mill rate. And that's really the ultimate thing that we need to be looking at and doing, including the housing element, because the housing element is very much a desperate need for
Yes,
Waterville right
I
now.
think that's very vital.
Yes, it is, and we have the Header Falls project where we have developers that are seriously interested. We're in committee doing work with that.
I think they started work the very next day after you guys had voted on that last thing there.
Yes,
I forget what it was.
we have a Header Falls development company that we are in negotiations with now, where they are building a master plan that we're going to look at and eventually approve. We have the old Martin's building, as you know, off the Hathaway, that has been, we have approved for possible development down there, as long as the Maine State Housing Authority will grant them,
The credits that they need.
the credits that they
Yeah.
need just to complete that project. But we're talking about two major elements of housing coming into Waterville that's going to help, again, make business grow.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. So let's talk about the ambulances, because that's one way that
Right.
they generate
Yeah.
revenue. I don't know if you're here when I read it to Phil, but just want to read Gary's
Yep.
comment this morning. I've heard a lot of prominent people from both parties indicate that if Waterville goes into the ambulance business, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar investment. One the city cannot afford, and it's a colossal mistake. As you know, the council already voted to purchase 2 ambulances, which we have found out that it's now been vetoed at the moment, that resolution. So they've already adopted the concept of going into the ambulance business. It's now time for the council to provide a detailed financial report from an unbiased agency indicating that revenues are guaranteed to surpass expenses every year, putting no risk to the taxpayers. Until this is provided, no further monies should be allocated for the creation of an ambulance service, significantly increasing the city's payroll expenses, including benefits, training, infrastructure, etc. Doesn't sound like it's going to save tax dollars. It's going to significantly raise taxes. In the meantime, Delta will continue providing excellent service with no risk to the taxpayers. What do you have to say about the whole ambulance?
Well, I certainly respect Gary Mayhew's analogy of it, and he's very well versed on a lot of different things. Great advocate. He was, to be honest with you, Gary was the first person that I ran into and convinced me to run for council. He was the very first person because he had trust in me to do the right things. I understand exactly where he's coming from. The ambulatory service is something that is being looked into and is progressing at an unprecedented rate, of course, because of our Waterville Fire Chief, Sean Essler. He has had this as a vision for many, many years, even when he was
10 years.
even when he was serving under then Chief David LaFountain. The biggest thing, as you know, in society today and in every municipality across the state of Maine is that there are not enough firefighters, and there are not enough infrastructure within the fire departments for them to be self-sustainable, and we are operating, honestly, on a shift-by-shift basis in the fire department. We are operating, as far as a manpower, at a very dangerous level every single day. If we didn't have a volunteer fire personnel, 5-6 firefighters at the most per shift responding to a major fire, whether it be a 1 alarm all the way up to a 5 or 7 alarm, is dangerous. And we've already seen many fire departments across the state lose firefighters based on staff because they're taking more risks. The volunteer fire department, if we didn't have that across the state of Maine, we would have even more. They are kind of the stopgap for a lot of different things. Ambulatory service is something I want to make very clear, and from what I know with the committee and from what I've known with understanding, Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essler, who's probably the most comprehensive department head that I've ever talked to as far as an analytical and statistical standpoint. This man has so many different figures and statistics that he has been
He's put a lot of work
yeah
into it.
that he has for years compiled. His grant writing is off the charts. The money that he has won through grant writing for the city of Waterville at no cost to the taxpayer to help alleviate taxpayer from having to be responsible. I couldn't put my faith in more of a person as a department head who is advocating for this, that it really levels the playing field for him, honestly speaking from his heart and soul, that this will self-sustain itself. We are not going to be a full-blown transport service. We're not even talking about transport service. This item on the agenda is simply to purchase 2 used ambulances.
I think that's what it is that's got a lot of people off kilter, is just the way that it's set up.
Right, they're
to get it,
conflating the
yes.
issues.
Yes, to get it.
Right now, to be honest with you, it's being over-exaggerated.
Right. They're
The-
seeing like 10 steps ahead.
Exactly.
We're only talking about this
The
right
intent for Waterville to go into the ambulatory transport service is there, yes, from the purchase of these 2 ambulances. We want to make something clear as what's been described at the council meetings with Fire Chief Sean Essler. Make it very clear, and they're very real numbers because I've seen them and heard them. There are times when Delta is completely overwhelmed. All of their ambulances are in play because they serve more communities than just ours.
Right.
A lot more.
And first responder time to accidents and potential life or death situations is real. Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essler demonstrated and articulated some of those incidents where there has actually had to been ambulatory services out of Augusta and other outlying towns that had to respond to us because Delta wasn't able to respond.
Right.
And we didn't have that type of infrastructure in our own Waterville Fire Department. By buying these 2 ambulances, that puts that infrastructure in Waterville. It provides the fact that, we have people that are paramedics that can be on these ambulances and can respond in any situation where Delta is overwhelmed and be there and take care of what needs to be taken care of, and probably be more prompt in life and death situations when they respond because they're obviously closer. They're more familiar with the ins and outs of the streets of Waterville, and it puts us into a mode where we can really save lives and make a difference.
So I guess what the question would boil down to now is do you feel that the mayor's veto is necessarily a good thing to slow it down so it can give us more time to look at everything? Or do you feel that it's not necessary?
Because you've already vetted the numbers.
The numbers have been vetted, the numbers have been confirmed and verified. The numbers from Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essler are very conservative, very conservative in nature. So there is kind of a barometer to the risk calculations, and he has factored that in from a very conservative standpoint. And even at that conservative standpoint, it looks like it creates a line of revenue that helps sustain itself, even with the hiring of additional personnel, if we had to put on those ambulances. It would self-sustain itself in a revenue-making fashion that it would have no effect on taxpayers as far as elevating the mill rate or being something that we look at property taxes to help sustain it. I also want to talk about what Gary said, outside agencies to look at. I can confirm from what I've heard from Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essel that he has gone to outside agencies for some of his information and his analytical numbers. So there has been research, not only by his inner department and his inner personnel, but he has gone to other fire departments and outlying venues and have got some of his data from outside venues that confirm what he's saying, that this is a self-sustaining line of revenue that could possibly subsidize the Waterville Fire Department to a degree where it's going to ask the city for less. So this is something that is very interesting. But
yeah, it seems like an exciting.
If the numbers
are there,
check out,
yes.
then it's
And I want to make clear that this, again, is just for the purchase of 2 ambulances.
Right.
It does set up a venue for people to say, you're going into the transport business. That is, we have
because we need the license.
Exactly.
Right.
And the licensing is not a big deal. We apply, and of course we show our credentials. It's really formality sort of, but again, like Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essel says, yes, this sets up for the intent to go into transport service, but it is not that as of now until. And I am for what the Mayor Nick Isgro is saying, to be careful, to be analytical, to make sure we every viable thing that we can do to confirm that, from every side, to look at this to make sure that this is not going to affect the Waterville taxpayer. I do understand what his veto is all about, as far as his intent of what his veto is about, to really what his intention was to allow more time. But at the same instance, I see no reason not to proceed with having ambulances, because that's what the agenda item is all about, is simply the purchase of 2 ambulances, because that infrastructure, even if we never go into the transport business, that infrastructure that's in the Waterville Fire Department will be used and will be utilized, and it will, even with existing personnel, the Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essel says, even if I have to be on the ambulance myself, and he is a confirmed paramedic, that we can use that infrastructure to our advantage and be a backup role model to Delta. This is not to take away from Delta. This is not to make them lose jobs. This is not to make them lose revenue. We want to enter into a backup mode in a partnership with Delta to help each other.
So one question, and then we'll wrap it up. Someone just asked, do you think the veto was necessary? And they're looking for a yes or no answer.
It's hard to say yes or no to that, because I don't know. I do know some of the mayor's intent was to buy time. And whether, I think it was, again, the veto happened, I believe, on a Friday after a Tuesday council meeting. So yeah, it was probably late coming in. And I think Mayor Nick Isgro's intent was to buy time, because he believes in having outside agencies coming in from an analytical standpoint to look at everything. I know that he has already gone to a committee meeting with the committee that meets with Waterville Fire Chief Sean Essel. He has walked away from that feeling more satisfied with some of the things that he saw. The transport part of it, he still has a lot of questions about. I still have some questions about. I do not believe his veto was one that is intended to be looked at as being divisional. I think he made it very clear to me, anyways, that it was to allow a delay of action, a delay of time for us to sit and look at this again from a perspective to ensure that the money is not going to be coming from taxpayers.
Right.
And just to make it clear, this was a resolution, so it only required 1 vote, as opposed to normally being
Correct.
required 2 votes.
Correct.
Like an order.
Yes.
So last thing we want to touch on is quickly, because we're going to wrap up, the community notes. Do you think time should be changed? You think the community notes should be scrapped? I know it was at the beginning of the meetings usually. Now it's at the end and it's 3 minutes.
Yes.
Follows Robert's rules typically. You think it should be changed or altered in any way?
Well, first of all, community notes is something that has been part of our normal council agenda for many, many years. The funny thing about it is, I've looked into it, investigated it, it wasn't that way for older councils. There was not a community notes. That was created, obviously within the last decade that we've had this community notes forum. And I see the pros and cons to it. I almost believe community notes should be something of a public events thing, announcements. I really believe that's the intent of what we wanted community notes when we first created it many years ago, was to have people come up like, President of the Board of Trustees for Waterville Public Library, Cindy Jacobs,
Right.
when she comes up and announces a specific event that's going on at the library, or
Scott for the
Scott McAdoo
CNL
with
with
the
the
Waterville
Land
Land
Trust.
Trust,
Right.
or has something to say about what's going on in a particular park or a particular event. That is what really community notes is all about. What has come into play has been, I have to articulate it as really poisonous types of things that have come in, has been, the council has been subjected to, the mayor has been subjected to, and there have been many lines of disorder and violations of order and apprehension and tension that has created an aura of divisiveness and misconduct within the council to levels where even public safety is being called into question. I can let everybody know that I have already gone and approached Waterville Police Department, and there will now be an officer present on beat, not necessarily inside the building all the time, but they will be checking in, and there will be a Waterville police officer in the immediate vicinity at all times now during council meetings.
Okay.
I can attest you to that because of what happened and what we've seen happen. Not necessarily what happened just recently, but what we've seen
It has
over.
the potential to get it.
There's been a few things growing on this.
And I think both of you can attest to what you've seen over even the contentious municipal budgets
Oh, yes.
that have pitted. And we have also seen some of those contentious things happen with council voting on a councilor.
Right.
As you can see, we've had, we can go back to the last Ward 5 contentious vote, and we can see where there was many groups of people that were in council chambers, and not everything went the way, according to the public, wanted it to go.
Right.
Correct.
So,
That were there.
and that created a lot of divisiveness and division, amongst councilors individually, and a lot of people that really pitted councilors against councilors and created animosities. And it makes it very difficult for a council to have dialogue, discussion, and cooperation when you have those elements in play at such an intense level. So yeah, I am more on the order of wanting community notes to go back to announcements.
To community notes.
Yeah, public events.
Having the structure.
Not for somebody to come up there and personally attack an individual councilor, attack the mayor. We all can say we are responsible for our own personal behavior.
Absolutely.
We're all responsible for our First Amendment rights. And I duly respect all of those things, and I think residents should have a time to say things. But they can still say things in the context of the council meeting. If there's something on the agenda that's on the agenda, they still have every right to come up to the podium and comment about what is on that agenda. If they
Right.
disagree with it, they are allowed the time to adamantly give their opinion about that item agenda.
And
So
you have longer than 3 minutes allocated for community notes.
exactly. So those things still give interaction with residents speaking upon the agenda items to the council about their feelings, about what they think, whether they agree or disagree, and they can still express their passions. But community notes cannot become a quorum of divisiveness and
Right.
disunity
I agree.
and dysfunction and partisanship and self-acclaimed agendas to the point where it becomes obtrusive, disorderly conduct, and it becomes to the point where it's really venomous to the point where it tears apart the very fabric of we want local government to be.
It just becomes a yelling match.
Yep. All right.
And nothing gets
Correct.
done.
Do you have any other questions, or we?
No, I think that's everything.
We appreciate
I
you
had.
coming on here and
Well,
having a chat with us.
I appreciate both of you
Definitely.
guys for
Thank
putting
you.
this on. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Have you on again sometime.
Yes, very much, anytime. Looking forward to doing that next year.
All right.
Again.
Of course, we'll still be here.
Okay?
Not the same place, but
All
the
right,
same
thank you
avenue.
guys very much, and thank you to the City Water.
Thank you for catching all sides of Kennebec until next weekend.
Yep. Hashtag ask if you.
Yeah,
have any
hashtag
questions.
ask. We even got the website up now,
Yep.
which is
Yep.
just allsideskennebec.com.
Yep. All sides of Kennebec.com. Check it out.
Check that out.
We'll have this later on there tonight as
Yep.
well, or on YouTube and Facebook.
Yep, we'll get it all put up. So thank you guys for your comments. Again, thank you, Sid.
Oh, very welcome.
And
Thank you
also
guys.
another big thank you to Phil
Yep.
Sophia for coming out today.
Next week we'll have Flavia
And
as
hopefully,
a guest,
yeah,
and
hopefully
maybe
we can
even
get Phil.
maybe even
Yep,
Phil
Maybe even Phil. So
as a debate type environment.
yep, maybe we
there
can
you
see
go.
we can get some dialogue going between
Yeah.
them two. See where they have common interests, I guess. Would be
Commonalities
nice,
and where
yeah.
they differ.
So until next time, guys. Have a good one.